Hello, everybody. It is time for yet another installment of the Heroic Girls Book Club. My name's John. I'm founder of Heroic Girls, and with me, as always, is Vivian, good friend, Disney Imagineer, jack of all trades. And we are here to talk today about one of my favorite graphic novels of all time, Persepolis. And if I had been a thinking person, I would not have chosen the complete Persepolis because this is a thick one. But I enjoyed it. This is, as I mentioned, one of my favorite graphic novels of all time, and I had a good time with it. So, Vivian, you've read Persepolis before or not read Persepolis?
I had read Persepolis before, but it had been a very long time, and again, I think same as Ghost World, it was interesting to approach it from the other side of teenager dumbhood.
Yeah, that just keep reminding me how much younger you are than me. That really makes me feel good. But I'm gonna fight a teenagehood for this thing, no matter which way you slice it. But yeah, so Persepolis was a fantastic book, and I wanted to start by talking about the art because it's the thing I know the least about and the thing that I lean on you the most about. And I will tell you like the three things that I noticed, and then you can explain why I'm wrong and what you noticed. So what I came up with for the art, number one, that Marjane Satrapi, who wrote the book, Satrapi, sorry, it's very simplistic style. It's cartooned. It's not super realistic. She's not trying to be realistic. And the other thing, those are two of my three observations. And the other thing I noticed was the exceptionally stark use of black and white. There's no gray in this thing at all. It's not just black and white in that there's no color. There's also no gray. It is solid black and white. There's not a hint of shading. There we go. Not a hint of shading or anything. And then I said that, and then there is gray in that one frame. That's from the movie. That's why that's
it's from the film.
That's from the film version. It is a great panel, though. That's what I love it. But yeah, so the book itself does not have any gray in it. And so what did you think of Marjane's art style?
I absolutely loved it. Love it. I love the super flat. I love what she's able to convey with just the black and the white.
Yeah.
Her background is as a painter. So I do kind of wonder what it kind of took out of her to restrain herself in that kind of a way. I'm sure she dreams in color and thinks in color. And then to put all these memories down in black and white. I think that it definitely gives it sort of I think it lends to the fact that this is documentation of memory. Right. I would say stylistically, because you're looking at something that she's experienced. And the other thing that happens with the black and white, for me at least, is it just makes everything so memorable and so compelling. Because it is so stark, and there is no grayscale, there is no shading. Like this image of her where she's putting up, I can't remember exactly the language that was in this frame, but it's her, her parents being avant-garde versus, the society that she's growing up in. She's able to use that so well. She uses patterns so interestingly. Even when she's composing a shot of, say, a bunch of soldiers marching, right? She composes it as pattern, and that works so well.
Oh, I know what you're saying. I'm thinking in my head, and look, we got producer Patty managed to find a good example of what you're talking about.
Thank you.
I was actually thinking, just riffing off of what you brought up, which I would not have come up with on my own. That another reason for black and white, because I think she could have done color if she had wanted to. So I think there was an element of choice there, and so much of her life could be represented in that fashion. The clothing that they were forced to wear under the fundamentalist Islamic regime was they pretty much had a choice of black, and that was it. And then she ended up boarding with nuns, and nuns are black and white. She's hanging out with the avant-garde European beatniks, and I'm betting they were all wearing black and white. So she just had this constant theme in her life that she was surrounded by people that were wearing these kind of solid black and white colors. But so yeah, I think it did work exceptionally well for me. The simplistic style of it worked exceptionally well for me. It was amazing when you look at how few lines she used, that her face was distinguishable from other faces and things like you always knew who was who in the book. And that is just an amazing ability to me. I mean, it's easy to do it when you're going for realism because you're getting every little detail that separates one person from the other. But the fewer lines somebody's using to do that and the less representational those lines are, it becomes pretty impressive to me. Her ability to distinguish faces and people without relying on, solid features and really detailed drawings to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really speaks to how absolutely talented she is of a communicator. And I know that I think she kind of pivoted from painting to going into graphic design.
Right.
I think that might also have something to do with it. I mean, I also really love all of her chapter headings rather than just doing chapter 4. She always has an interesting title, sometimes with some kind of interesting icon that goes along with it. And that kind of distillation of expression, of architecture, of what she's trying to show you, I think is very much, speaks to a background in graphic design.
Here's which way do I gotta go?
So, and also like the design of these two, like that's straight off of a Voss, right?
Right.
That really hard profile.
Right.
She's using her own cultural background and the art historical.
Oh.
From Persia, like that's all from that. Some of the fleur-de-lis that you kind of see in the backgrounds as well.
Right.
I was looking up some different kind of reference points. I'm like, oh, you do see that in text, you see it in fabrics.
Right.
So interesting.
Yes. I'm going to pretend that I have the art history background to completely follow what you're saying there. As far as the history of art in Persia. Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. I didn't want to, speak out of turn. No, but that's really cool too. I did love the art. I think we can say we love the art. It's very effective. It is also, once again, not, I think, what people traditionally associate with modern comics as far as, the comic book scene, not necessarily like comics in the newspaper or graphic novels that you find in the library, but it just became dominated by this, I always go back to Jack Kirby as being the penultimate example of that, this, hyper masculine, I want to say realistic, but it's not really realistic, but it's this exaggerated version of reality where people are muscled and their outfits are painted on, but it's detailed in a sense that this is not. I think it works. Every time it breaks it, I think that interests me so much because I grew up just solidly in the Jack Kirby world. So when I see other stuff and as an adult more, I can relate to that more, and it always grabs my attention when you see somebody who's trying something different or doing something different, although that stuff's been here all along. I know that. So go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I did hear a story about from the author talking about the first comic that she read, which was Dracula, and she read it with her cousin. They read it together, and I guess she kind of had this impression that, or not this impression, but when she was growing up, comics were Tintin. That's kind of what she was supposed to, and she thought, very childish.
Back here somewhere.
I mean, like they're objectively amazing, but to her they were very childish, right?
Right.
She got her hands on a Dracula comic, but her cousin didn't speak French, so they read it together. And as part of this ritual of reading it together, they would eat raw chicken. To get into the spirit, right, of like Dracula, and then they both got worms. So
yeah, that would be what happens when you eat raw chicken. That's why you don't do that. That should have been included in the book. I'm kind of disappointed that story's not in here.
That story blew me away because it's so much in keeping with who you see her as when you see her as a child.
Right.
She's a leader with terrible ideas, but she's shooting for the moon.
She buys into them. Whatever she's believing at the moment, she buys into 100%, and that's kind of endearing to her. That goes all the way up until she becomes a full-fledged adult.
Mm-hmm.
She's whatever her passion or idea, the new thing that she's latched into in the moment, she is 100% invested in that ideology or philosophy or feeling. And I think that's very relatable for a lot of people, although I don't think too many people have done it to the extremes that she did all the way through the book, and with as much variety as she did all the way through the book. Yeah, that was kind of what I thought was, my original idea was that she, which I think was an easy take, was that she's the penultimate like person stuck between two worlds. She is stuck between the fundamentalism of Iran and secularism, and she's stuck between Europe and the Middle East, and she's just, she finds she doesn't fit in either. Then communist and prophet. But then I went back again and I reread, and it's not exactly that. She is a person that just latches onto a belief system and buys into it 100%, and then gets disillusioned and then tries to find another belief system. That was how I kind of interpreted the book up until she became an adult. I mean, she starts out and she's talking to God. She gets these visions of God speaking with her. And then her parents are communists, so she latches on to Karl Marx. And for a little bit, they're kind of living side by side, which should have caused some cognitive dissonance for her, but it didn't. But she was 100% a communist and a revolutionary. Then she was a patriot. Then she was against the government. She just, is constantly kind of in search of that identity. And that continued when she, I think, went to Europe, and she was looking for like kind of the love of her life. And she was, trying to fit in among different groups like the punk rockers. And then she ended up with the druggies for a while. And she just, that was kind of what it is, I think a long, extended coming of age story of someone trying to find their own identity and basically trying on other people's identities as like a coat and seeing how it fit, and then moving on to the next one when they found problems with it.
I think what's interesting about that, because I hadn't really thought about it in terms of her, I picked up on her sense of commitment, right? But I didn't really think about it in terms of her searching for anything. So that's definitely, I can definitely see that through line. I think what's interesting is that she does have such a strong personality herself, and she was raised with having very high self-esteem. She doesn't, even though she finds herself in very troubling situations, she never really, and maybe correct me if I'm misremembering this, but I don't really think she questions herself as a person. She always seems to be aware of, self-aware in some kind of a way.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to do this because this is what's going to serve my goal. Like, I'm going to change myself because I feel like this is what's going to make me fit in. So it's goal oriented, and not, she doesn't seem like I'm going to do this because it's going to make me a different person. She knows she's doing something because it's going to make people perceive her as a different person.
Yeah. I think that's true to an extent. I do think there was towards the end of her first stay in Europe, when she had been kicked out of boarding school and was doing a lot of drugs and ended up homeless for a while. Mm-hmm. I think she did have a couple moments where she was remembering that her grandmother had told her to always have dignity and be true to yourself. And she was thinking about, what the things she had done in order to do that. And she also lied about being Iranian at one point because she was embarrassed that she was Iranian because everyone thought Iranians were terrorists. And then she overheard them talking behind her back about her lying that she was Iranian, and she got angry, and that made her realize, I mean, she never had a long period of that self-doubt, but there were moments when she realized, when she veered off that path, that she didn't want to do that, and she would snap back rather quickly. Yeah. So, yeah, I do think that's in general true. She, when she bought into a philosophy or something, she was 100% convinced she was right. She would go against her parents, to school, anything else. She is in her own way, she was a private fundamentalist army of one. Whatever the thing was that she believed, she was 100% she was right. And if you didn't adhere to it, she was very good at seeing the hypocrisy in other people when they did not live up to their own ideals. That was one of the things. Her parents were communists, and that was mentioned. And when the revolution came, in the Iranian Revolution, they thought it was a great thing because the proletariat would rise up and they would turn into this secular workers' paradise. Didn't quite work out that way. No. But the contradiction that she spots, and she never explicitly, calls them out on it, but the fact that it's in the text, I think she's quite aware, is that her parents were communists, but her mother was also the daughter of a prince. They were descended from royalty, the former king of Iran. And they were quite well to do, and they hired a live-in maid who didn't know how to read and was a kind of a lower social caste. And they didn't always treat her as well as they could. The incident that really comes to my mind was the maid was in love with the boy next door, and the father found out about it. And he went over and told the boy next door that she's just a maid. She doesn't even know how to read. If you're thinking she's my daughter, she's not. And he basically kind of destroyed her chance at having a relationship with that boy by, saying she's not good enough for you because she is this lesser person, which completely flies in the face and destroys the idea of, that we're all equal under communism. Even though he had this belief system, he didn't always adhere to it the way that he should have. I guess that would be the way. And that was a constant through her life. Her teachers at school that were super religious, she'd remember what they were like before they were super religious, so that she spotted the hypocrisy in different people that were supposed to be authority figures in her life. And that gave her a level of cynicism, but she kept jumping to the next thing, trying to find what if there was some ultimate truth out there somewhere.
Yeah, I think that that incident with her father and that gentleman, to me, had a lot to do with the deception that she had, that the maid had framed herself as the older sister. And to me, it was less of an indictment of the father and more of a illustration on how prevalent the class system was, and how that without the honesty of the two people entering into the relationship, on the equal footing of facts, they have to me, it almost felt like he was protecting the maid. I'm so sorry, I can't remember. I didn't write her name down. The maid in her own way, in his own way, because in that kind of old-fashioned way, like you have to get the letters back, right? So that there's no paper trail of you misrepresenting yourself. Right. And then I think there was kind of the added stress that the letters were written in his child daughter's handwriting, right?
Right. I want to get Melissa's comment here that Marjane is super invested in things, shifts around so much before she finds her footing. I think that, I can see that. I think it is also that, childlike insistence that she just was unable to deal with any, fractures or deviancy from these philosophies or these, ideologies that she would adopt. She would, because, the reality is, as an adult, that you start to realize, no, none of these systems are perfect. There are always going to be flaws, and people are flawed, and you can't expect everyone to live up to even things that they espouse. It's just going to happen. But with Marjane, it seems like she would spot the flaws in the people that were supposedly adherents of the system, and then, or in herself sometimes, and that would make her realize that she would just throw the whole ideology away, because that's where I got the idea that she was searching. That was my interpretation of the events of the book, was that she kept looking for this external truth, this system of life that was going to be true and real for her. And eventually, I think the real truth is there's no perfected system of truth out there. You just kind of have to find it for yourself. And that's where I think she ended up by the end of it. I don't know that this is explicit in the text at all. This is kind of my interpretation of her interpretation of the events, but that's kind of where I ended up on it.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly in alignment with humanistic storytelling, right? It's a search for truth and it's a search for self, right? I think that in particular for the character, I'm not going to say that this is true for the author, but for the character that I saw on the page, to me, everything was really kind of circling around education all the time.
Yeah.
The fact that she was such a voracious reader, and, she may have been kind of like Melissa was saying, she's shifting around before she can find her footing. I feel like that's how we should all be, though. We should always be, limber and able to pivot when we see, here's new information. Let me react and take that in, right?
Right.
As a child, I think that manifests in some very immature ways. But I think as she gets older, I think that becomes a credit to the character.
Yeah, I think I think she did have that. In and as a child, seeing the hypocrisy in other people, and then rejecting huge swaths of them and stuff, and just dropping them and saying the whole system's flawed and stuff is a flaw, because it's not a flaw to see the hypocrisy. It's a flaw to just start chucking stuff aside, because we're all flawed and everything. I think that's the kind of realization you get when you're growing up, that people are flawed, people are different. You have to be able to accept that, and it doesn't mean that everything about them is immediately bad. And then we have Sarah here, who said she loved Persepolis, the book and the movie, and Marjan captured the Iranian immigrant experience so well for us. Well, based on the statement and the last name, which I am not going to try to pronounce right now, I am going to guess that she has some personal experience with that. I do love that kind of thing as well. What I was talking with my wife, producer Patty here, a little bit ago, and one of my observations was I loved seeing the United States through someone from another country's eyes, and not as a polemic directed at us. She didn't write this for an American audience. She was living in France at the time. And so we're mentioned and we're called out for some of the bad things we did, which I know for a fact we did do at the country. And but it wasn't like somebody was trying to convince me of anything or anything. Like, just casually in passing, oh yeah, and they're funding both sides of the war, just to keep us busy, because so they could destroy Saddam's army, and so that we wouldn't threaten Israel. And I'm like going, yeah, we probably did do that. It's very sad and unfortunate, and it's so matter of factly stated and glossed over, and yet there's some hard truth in there, and I love that ability to get outside yourself, and see somebody else's perspective. It's one of what I think is always the beauty of storytelling, is getting a perspective that you couldn't possibly have yourself, because you're not that person, and getting to see what other races, genders, religions, countries, what do other people think that are different than me? And this is definitely right up that alley. So
definitely.
And we should at least mention the movie. I was thinking the other day, and I remembered the Persepolis, the movie, was the first Blu-ray I ever bought, because I loved the movie so much. It was the very first Blu-ray I purchased with Persepolis. If you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommended it. It's super true to the book. The book has way more information in it, because even a comic has more space for story than a movie. At least when they're this size, they do. But it is very true to the book, and Marjane Satrapi was very involved in making the movie, and the art style is just spot on. It looks like she animated the whole thing by hand, which I know she didn't. There was a lot of people involved, but they got her art style so well on the screen that you really feel like that it's something that she personally did. So it's if you never saw Persepolis, the movie, that was actually what I saw first. I'm going to be honest. I saw the movie first, and then I went and said, I did buy the graphic novel like within a week of seeing the movie. I dug up the graphic novels, and I got to read this thing. So fantastic movie. And that's we haven't talked. Have you seen the movie? I assume you have, or
I have seen the movie. I saw it, back when it came out. I don't think I saw it in theaters, but I think I've seen it at least twice. I wasn't able to rewatch it for this book club, but I remember rewatching it when Waltz with Bashir came out.
Oh yeah.
Because they both had it, and not for the reason you're thinking, because they both were using unconventional animation systems at the time. For animation, right?
Right.
And her role on that film, she is credited as a co-director, and this was an effort that she never set out to do. This wasn't something. This was a friend of hers said, I want to be a producer, and she's like, well, I got this property, you know. So let's have bobbity boobity, making an absolutely amazing film, which is so kind of in keeping with, I wish that was in the Persepolis books, where, through sheer force of will and through also happenstance, which I feel like so much of her life is just, and then circumstance occurs, right? She now has a very robust directing career.
Yeah, she did the voices with Ryan Reynolds and Anna Kendrick's in that one, I think. And anyway, it's Ryan Reynolds works as a guy, and his cat starts talking to him and telling him to kill people, which has happened to a lot of us. So I that is one that is on my watch list. I have not gotten to it yet, but I just saw it and I thought the trailer was funny. And I'm the kind of person that then like look at the back of the box. Who's doing this? And Marjane Satrapi directed it. So she has worked with Deadpool, so she's staying in that comic book vein. But it looked like a very funny movie, and that's so. Yeah, she did. She stuck with the directing gig, even moving to live action. So showing another facet of her talents.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where people will want, work their whole lives towards something, fully goal oriented, and just through the stories that she wants to tell and what's important to her and her desire to find laughter and things. I feel like she's just made such an amazing career out of that.
Yeah, so that anti-authoritarian streak, we were talking about that buying into systems and speaking her mind. That's a definite through point in the book for me. Is her unwillingness to, there's a negative side to that, and burning bridges everywhere you go, which certainly happened to her all over everywhere. But on the other hand, we're kind of with her, when she is the kid standing up in the school saying, "Why do we have to wear the scarf? And why is it scandalous for us to show 2 inches of our hair, but the guys can wear anything they want?" Again, spotting that hypocrisy and stuff, but also just being completely unwilling to kind of kowtow to authority, and she questions authority at every level, all of the time, in a way that I think very few people would have been. You can either say brave or stupid enough to do, because she was in real legitimate danger in some of those. I mean, it cost her in Iran, could have cost her her life, and even in Europe, it cost her her place of living several times. So she, her unwillingness to compromise, to bend to the truth, but it was a kind of an admirable quality, and it you just worried that it was going to get her killed. That was basically where I was at. I was like, "Oh, I so support you. Don't die."
Yeah, please, just within moderation. Yeah. I think something else that it showed too. I feel like she had one teacher in Austria, who talks to her as an adult, and who doesn't come at her from this place of the rod, right?
Right.
It was interesting to see the unwillingness of all these authority figures that she challenges to engage her and to engage her on the level that she is trying to engage them. So yeah, she gets a little preachy and finger pointy when they say like, "Oh, you have to do this," and she says, "Why?" Right, and she pushes it back. To me, it really felt like a true signal that they didn't believe in what they were talking about, because they wouldn't engage with her. No one really comes back with her with as logical an argument as.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that they don't believe. Here's what I'm going to try to you. Okay. It's that they're dogmatic. They believe without thinking. They bought into the system, but they don't analyze it at all. So, if they bought into it and they don't need to explain anything because it's the truth. The truth is true, and that's it. And Marjane, as a child, is reading, Karl Marx, and she's reading, all these political philosophers, and Sartre. I'm going to mispronounce his name. Satre. What's that? What is that? I don't remember how to pronounce his name. Jean Paul. And I've read it, but I don't know how to say it. But she's read all these different books on philosophy and political systems. As a kid, she was reading communist theory. And so she is just armed in a way that I don't think most of the people she is challenging are. She has big questions that have been raised by her, her reading and her intellectual curiosity, and they're just completely incapable of answering them. And I don't think it's that they're unwilling to engage with her at that level. I honestly believe most of them were completely incapable of engaging with her at that level. They don't have any answers. They just, you believe because you're supposed to believe, and that's it. So, again, the whole like quest for answers type thing, I think is out there. And I feared for her life in different parts of the book, although since she wrote it and I knew she was alive, I knew that was that we weren't going to get a real bummer ending there. But and that's another interesting thing. This movie and the book banned in Iran. You've never been shown in Iran that I'm aware of. I think I read an article. It might have been shown at a university one time, like a private screening type thing. But and I'm sure that it has been bootlegged and is moving around in other ways. But it officially never been screened there. Also banned in Lebanon for a period of time, and then Lebanon relented in the face of public pressure. What I think is interesting is also banned in Chicago, this public school system, because parents challenged it because it had, I don't know, a boob in it or something. I'm not sure. I'm trying to rack my brain. There's drug use and sex. Yeah, it was banned in it was the second most challenged book by the American Library Association in 2014. And we were, again, producer Patty and I were talking about that. And I'm like, that's weird. That's way after the book came out. And I went, yeah, but the movie had just come out. So the movie came out and people started buying the book, and the book got added into curriculums at schools. And then some parent, who knows what they were offended by. They were offended by probably sex, drug use, alternate religious viewpoints, any of that could be. I don't know what triggers people anymore, but that, something like that. And I think what a shame, because this is such a great search of self-identity, coming of age story that I think so many, especially teens, could relate to, the things that she goes through. And then not only do we go through the teen era, we get all the way to adulthood, where you can see, here's what comes after this. Here's where you hope you end up in life, even after having all these struggles and everything. I think it's a fantastic book for teens. And what teen doesn't feel like, even if you've born, raised here and everything, every teen feels like an angsty, alienated outsider, even if for most of them it's nowhere near as true as it might have been for Marjane in her situation when she's living on her own in Europe.
Right. I think if you want to talk about framing a little bit, and her voice kind of going through, her adult voice carrying through the entire story.
Right.
Something I thought was really grounding. Yes, to your point, it does kind of give you a little bit of okay, well, we know she survives, right?
Right.
But we don't know in what shape she will survive. And the last thing you want to see is some kind of her going through something more traumatic than she already is going through.
Right.
I think one of the most traumatic things she does experience is seeing her friend's bracelet after the bombing at her house.
Right.
And what I think was really interesting is she doesn't show that. She draws a black frame, because it's me that felt like a complete mental shutdown. It
was a bracelet attached to something, and she didn't even say what it was, but you get the feeling, the hand or the arm or something was still there. And I mean, she has lived through traumas that we can't even imagine, which was hilarious to me that when she got in with this kind of nihilistic punk crowd in Germany, they just thought that was cool that she had been through a war and a revolution. They saw the oh, you've lived life, and it's that all these interesting things have happened to you. I don't think Marjane would have wished those things to happen on anybody. It's not, because they haven't experienced that kind of thing, they're able to put this veneer on it that it is in some way a good, enriching life experience that it really isn't. It's just traumatic. I mean, they had this kind of hero worship of the idea that she had lived through a war. That come on, wars are not fun for anybody. That's not that's a kind of a childish way of thinking about war. But she enjoyed the fact that it gave her prestige in the group, especially when she had moved to Europe. There was also that search of identity and family. She was all by herself, so she kept finding different groups to try to fit in with. And a lot of times she was trying new things and experimenting with new things because that's what the other people around her were doing, so that she could try to fit in, which I think a lot of people can sympathize with. I think we've all done that at some point. You're like, okay, everybody else is going to see Transformers. Like, all right, fine, I'll go see Transformers. Although I didn't bow to that particular peer pressure, but a lot of people did. I have no other explanation to why people saw that movie.
I think the first one.
And then, no, you could have taken what's her name? Who's the actress in that? Megan Fox. You could have. I always said you could have taken a poster of her bent over the hood of the car in her short shorts and crop top, and just moved it from scene to scene in the movie, and it would have the same effect. I like her in interviews. I think she's a wonderful person, but I don't blame her for asking for more and then getting booted off the series by Michael Bay, because she's like, I don't want to just be a prop. All right, so sorry. Putting Transformers away.
Transformers sidebar. So what were you just talking about? It made me think of something. I had a note here about revolutions.
She was trying to fit in with different groups.
Different groups. So,
right.
My note here on revolutions, I was writing down different revolutions that I was noticing. So there's the revolution of the war. She's
Right.
also gets a very unfortunate front row seat to the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking of also the revolution of self. And I thought there was a really interesting moment that happened when her mother comes for the very first visit and she has this, infusion of love and culture
Right.
and family that was so desperately needed. One of the things her mom says was, "Oh, I was looking in some of the different windows and she saw new fashions and she's like, I'm going to make these clothes for you." So
Right.
even though the mom is, yes, she's the granddaughter of a prince, you see her being so crafty and so smart all the time.
Right.
This is a sidebar. But the main character, Marjan, kind of casually says that she hasn't bought any new clothes in 19 months at that
Right.
point.
Yeah,
And
and she had grown 7 inches.
grown 7 inches. So that happened to me when I was, I think, between 12 and 13. And my arms are still so long. There's basically nothing that fits my body that, like, my arms don't stick out.
Right.
Right? But I just thought that was so interesting that all these sort of revolutions that she was having on herself and trying to fit in, none of
Right.
it was happening via clothing. It was all happening on her actual self. She was chopping
Right.
her hair. She was, painting her face. These were things
Right.
that she was doing to herself, not to something that she could change out very easily. And I thought that was kind of interesting that, something that she had really prized in her youth, denim jackets and Nikes, she really, really lost sight of that once she was, yeah, it's such a great look too. Like, I want to wear that.
The 80s were good in some ways, but yeah, I think she did do that. And towards the end of the book is when she realized that there was more out there. And one thing I loved was when she went to Europe. I think she found some things she needed to become the person she was destined to become in Europe. But
Yeah.
by the time she left Europe, it was literally killing her. And she went back to Iran, which in some ways was still repressive, but she found a lot of things that she needed in Iran too, particularly family, but also some stability. And she went back to school and got an art degree, and it kind of rounded her off. And so she had a little bit of both places inside her. It's not like she went to Europe and completely rejected Persian culture and Iran. That's not the story at all. She definitely sees a tremendous amount of value in both cultures, and I thought that was a nice part of the story too. That we didn't get this, I don't know, story of her like rejecting one side or the other, but that there's something there in both.
Right.
And so Melissa is saying that it was nice to get a view behind the curtain of a culture that many Westerners don't get to see, humanizes things, and the way she moves through all these situations is very relatable. I think we can agree with that. I think it's really easy, as the United States, of not having a single opinion about Iran other than our image of Iran, other than angry bearded protesters chanting "Death to America." I mean, that is literally, I think, all that some people know about Iran. And there are other places in the world that I think are somewhat like that, but I love these stories that humanize different parts of the world that we don't know much about. Iran also has, oh God, what was it? There was a movie, A Separation, was up for Best Foreign Picture a couple of years ago. That's another wonderful movie. I love stories set in places that I don't know much about, that let you get in at the human level rather than at the governmental level or the political level. And I think it really does help humanize people. I think the world would be a better place if everybody understood other nations at that level rather than just thinking about them in kind of geopolitical terms and stuff, just remembering that there are people there and that they have these lives, dreams, and aspirations too. Rather than this cartoonish version of the Iranian people, you get this more well-rounded version of what Iranian life is like. Sure, there are people there. Yeah, we may not like the Iranian government, but Marjane doesn't like the Iranian government that much either. That's not. But the Iranian people, that's a different story. So
Yeah, understanding. I mean, I think it's in her preface on the book as well.
yeah,
That she just wants to explain. She just wants to tell her own
right,
story, and I think that there is kind of the Western eye, via James Bond, via superhero movies, where,
Yeah.
We almost always view other cultures through some level of colonial lens,
Right.
and where if you see kind of a mass of brown faces, it's sort of carte blanche just to mow them down because, well, they almost believe and think the same thing, and none of them have families, right? As
Right.
though they're stormtroopers, when really, any one of those people could have been the son of the nanny who didn't want to have her son sent away.
Right. It's you can see where, we would, some of the, especially the boys that got sent off to war in her class,
Mm-hmm.
those would be the kind of people that if we saw them in the middle of the war, something we think, oh, they're fanatics and everything else. And you see how there was an indoctrination program in place to do there. Many of them didn't want to do it. Their parents were crying for them every night. They didn't want them to be there. Letting us see the other, kind of peeking behind the curtain and not just seeing them as this homogenous mass of people that only believe one certain way, think one certain thing, I think is really useful. And to your point, I do think pop culture has not treated of the Middle East very well at all. I think the two narratives that we have gotten are terrorist and Aladdin. That's pretty much it. That's just, I'm not kidding. That's it. Those are the two. Pick one.
Magic lamp.
Yeah, imagine you're either wearing harem pants or you want to kill us. That's the only things that people in the Western world. I mean, what other stories do we get very, very often? Not much. No. And so, again, telling these stories I think is important. And I go out of my way to find stories like this because that interests me. Much like Marjane, she's more interested in political philosophy. I like the humanization stories of people around the world. I'm always, when I dig up, a story from a region of the world I don't know much about, I'm more interested in what the people are like on a day-to-day basis than I am what the political agenda is.
Yeah. I think her relationship with faith and the way that gets tracked through the story is really interesting as well, especially in terms of what's meant.
Producer Patty, I will read that from the sidebar. Can people move it? I do. We will get to that. I promise, Sarah. But I can't. I want to at least be able to see Vivian.
Because I think with her family being communists and from what she imagined or from what the main character felt like in the right, not right as in conservative, but right as in morally correct.
Right.
At the very beginning of the story, she has such an interesting one-on-one relationship with God,
right,
where they can talk together, and he can inform her basically, right? He can inform her. She kind of checks in with her, like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and then she loses that relationship, in such a heartbreaking way. And then what I thought was really interesting was the next time she does have a conversation with God directly, she's going to get her French baccalaureate, which I should probably look that up to see what is that.
Yeah, I was wondering. It seemed to be some sort of graduation of high school type of. I know that there are other countries that have this kind of like final exam to pass what we would consider high school. It's a big test. You take it, and then And I want to, before it scrolls off the page here, I got to read Sarah's quote here because it's a great one. It is also one that I love from Marjane, and but it was too big that it was hiding us, so I don't want it to scroll up anymore. And her favorite quote is, "The world is not divided between East and West. You are American, I am Iranian. We don't know each other, but we talk together and we understand each other perfectly. The difference between you and your government is much different than the difference between you and me. And the difference between me and my government is much bigger than the difference between me and you. And our governments are very much the same." I think this quote was in the back of my head, influencing some of my thinking about this, and I'd forgotten that it came from Marjane. I know this quote. It is a fantastic quote. I think it is a framework that I have kept in my head as a way to think about interpersonal and governmental relationships. And I agree with it 100%. It's a great way of thinking about the world, that people are kind of the same.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and Melissa brought up the movie Not Without My Daughter. I kind of remember that as Sally Field, and I think it was the whole like her daughter's getting kidnapped to be married to a sheik or something. I don't know. I didn't see it, but I'm sure it was not a very enlightened film. So I'm going to go along with you on that. And yeah, so it's her view of the world and how countries and people should interact. I think is exactly right. And that brings up another point. When they made the movie, she insisted that it be animated and not be live action, because she said the second it became live action, it would become a foreign film. You would see the people as, that's one of the beauties of cartooning, is that everybody can see themselves as a cartoon, but as another person, it gets harder for some people. The whole idea of Scott McCloud understanding comics idea that, the simpler the drawing, the more everyone can see themselves as that drawing. So she felt that if you put it as live action with Persian actors, that in the movie, that it would be perceived and received by the French audience in a completely different way, that it would fail at its task of humanizing them because they wouldn't be able to get past the point that they didn't look like them. So keeping it animated was important to her. And I think, I'm glad they did, because I love animation and I love her art. And so that's fantastic. And we got Catherine Deneuve's voice in the French version, which, if you're watching it, watch it with a French title. I know they didn't even speak French in the real thing, in her real life, but I don't know. I like it better. And there's that adorable, I think it's just in the trailer where she sings "Eye of the Tiger." Fantastic. That's fantastic. So watch the French version.
It is a very attractive voice performance. I do want to point out one thing, that France has a much different relationship with animation than the US does. I think our market is cornered by 4 studios who are producing content that is overall general audience and all skewed towards children. And we're the biggest film market on the planet, but we're somehow the last film market to accept animation as a medium and not a genre. So I think having it go, having the vehicle be animation to a French audience, I think, can achieve exactly the goals that she's looking for without also having the stigma where people say, well, it's just a cartoon. Why is it so serious? And how come they're not all rabbits, right? So, I also look up Not Without My Daughter. And not only is it, Sally Field trying to save her daughter from a sheik, the sheik is played by British actor Alfred Molina.
Oh. Alfred Molina, also good for playing ignorant South American peasants in Indiana Jones. in Raiders of the Last Ark, he was the "throw me the idol, I throw you the whip" guy. That's Alfred Molina's first film role. By the way, Alfred Molina, fantastic actor, but I'm glad that he's moved out of playing other people's racial stereotypes.
Yeah, maybe he's like the only Spaniard descent person from the London stage, and they're like, that Alfred Molina.
Yeah, good fellow. And I was thinking earlier when we were talking about how they consistently portray Middle Eastern people as terrorists, and for a chunk of time in the 80s, they kept using Cliff Curtis as that terrorist. Cliff Curtis, of course, being Maori. He's not. He's the guy that was. If you ever saw Whale Rider, he's the dad in Whale Rider, and he was the Middle Eastern terrorist in True Lies and a bunch of other stuff. They kept casting him, and I'm like, oh man, at every time of life, you always think, oh, we're being pretty progressive now. And then you let 10 years pass and you look back and you go, God damn, we were assholes.
Oh, no. Yeah, I did. I was listening to a lot of Satrapi's interviews, and then she drops an R-bomb at some point, and I was like, what's Daisy?
Yeah, it's tough.
Like you're saying, 10 years goes by, and, I'm sure nowadays people be like, but, back then.
Yeah, it's and we got the plot of Not Without My Daughter. Okay, so Sally's the one who marries the sheik, and then they go to his country, and then he won't let her. She won't let her and the daughter out again. They're trapped by the repressive women have no rights system in the other country. Yeah, great. That's I do know that there's some unfairness in courts and system over there, but I'm just not sure that's the one and only story we should be telling over and over again. That kind of thing. I think it's corrosive to our greater understanding of one another. And Alina is saying that we should also listen to the English version because Iggy Pop is in it as the uncle, and of course, anything with Iggy Pop can't be all bad. The one that I was going to go off on another. We just watched The Secret of Ariadne the other day, and it kills me that there is a English translation and an American translation because we couldn't possibly understand what the British accent, so they revoiced it. So
which one is Saoirse Ronan in?
She's in the British version, and then the American version. The one improvement in the American version is they got Carol Burnett as the older woman, and she's fantastic. She's just killing it. And they had Judi Dench or something. So, anyways, that's the other voice. Anyways, moving on.
Connect one thing here. So Iggy Pop is the great uncle in English. And Melissa had mentioned earlier about Chicken and Plum.
Oh, yeah, Chicken and Plum.
A highlight of the uncle character, kind of delving more into
right.
his life. And, you can tell in the comic that he's suffered some huge heartbreak. He goes to jail for so many years and he comes out and says that it wasn't as bad as his wife leaving him. And, that's such a heartbreaking comment. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think that, that is, Satrapi does not have some gigantic body of work. If you want to read everything she's written, that's not going to take you too long. All of it is worth reading, though. She's a very good writer. And, again, I think, Persepolis is probably going to always be the crown jewel, but everything she's done is worth taking a look at. If you had to walk away with the one, lesson I think that she learns in the book that is explicitly stated is that line from her grandmother, which I have written down: always keep your dignity and be true to yourself. And the times when she had the most struggles in her life were the times that she wasn't heeding that advice, when she was trying to be someone different, when she wasn't being true to her values. I mean, she got into the drug scene mainly to try to fit in, and that ended up really backfiring badly on her. And she had that thought that she wasn't being true to herself. And shortly after that, when she got to go home and kind of recenter herself a little bit, and that's a good lesson for anyone in life. I loved the character of the grandma, by the way. That was another one of my favorite characters in there. Her descriptions of her, and there was a character that never came across as inauthentic or hypocritical in any way. We always saw her portrayed in a positive light. So you can tell Marjane had some very fond feelings for grandma. There was no moment where you went, "Oh, grandma's a little racist" or something like that. We never had any of that. Grandma was awesome all the time.
Yeah, and, it did make me want to just out of curiosity try putting jasmine in my bra, because I do have a jasmine plant upstairs, and it just seems so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can't really have an opinion on this one, so I can't go there with you. But yeah, I did notice the scene.
Where are you? That, and then also icing your breasts to keep them firm. So that was kind of a fun little, everyone's got every
10 minutes morning and night. You're not doing that.
You're not gonna, and I was like, but does she? I'm trying to just think of the logistics of it, but it does.
Producer Patty is voicing that sounds miserable.
Well, if you want to be a grandma with, nice and round bosoms, but there was those really humanizing moments like that. Every woman's got their own crazy things that they do to you're part of your youth routine.
Right.
There was also a really interesting tidbit that I caught in Marjane Satrapi talking about her grandmother, where she talked about how she liked to explain things to her grandmother when she was growing up and tell her, "Oh, well, we learned in school today that lying is a sin, and that's evil." And her grandmother would just say, "That depends." And anything that her grandmother would just come back with, "That depends." There's always another perspective. There's always another viewpoint.
Right. That's interesting, because that is the lesson I think that she learned at the end when I was talking about moving from these ideology to ideology. She was trying to find this one set of hard and fast rules that make everything make sense, and that were always true and stuff. And the reality is there's not something like that. At some level, all these systems break down. There's never one size fits all answer for every situation, and you have to deal with people as people and situations as situations. And and their grandmother had that from the beginning of the story, and hopefully Marjane by the end of the story had that.
That's an interesting tie back to what she experiences through religious fundamentalism and control, right?
Right.
She herself trying to find control in her own environment while also being controlled by an exterior environment.
Yeah.
And then having to learn to live in the gray.
You live in the gray. It's a harder place. Having that firm set of rules and everything that you just have to live by and stuff makes your life very easy, which is what I think the appeal of fundamentalism is for some people, is that, that black and white view of the world, that everything's either one thing or the other, good or bad or whatever else. Living in a morally complex world, intellectually complicated world where not everything is easy to pigeonhole or stuff like that requires a lot more from people. I get the feeling that Marjane would be like the most interesting party guest of all time. She would be smoking in my house, which would drive me crazy. But then I'd go, she's European and Iranian. I'm just gonna deal with it. I would love to have her over. She seems so awesome. What's one other thing I thought? Oh, it was also a history lesson for a lot of Americans. I vaguely knew about the Iran-Iraq War. And, and of course, my perspective on the Iranian Revolution was, I was like a kid and you weren't born because you're young, but I was little. And, the only way that we Americans kind of interfaced with that or knew what was going on was that there were hostages taken at the embassy. So it just turned into, the new government's evil and awful, which, they don't come across great here either, but no thought about the Iranian people as a people. It was just, how was it impacting like these, 18 people or something that they had held hostage? That was it. And so getting, again, a kind of perception of the underpinnings of that, like, what led up to it, why that revolution happened. And then the Iran-Iraq War, I knew very, very little about. And, I think I learned more about the Iran-Iraq War around the time of the Iraq War, because all of a sudden, that's how Americans learned about other countries, invade them. But but that made me more interested in the region and, how we got there and stuff. So I did more reading. And then I'm like, I never get to read the story where something happens in the world and I find out that we were just the victors and the heroes of the place. It never seems.
And then everybody clapped.
Those stories are the kind of things you get when you're a kid, but when you're an adult, you read and you go, God, almost every, the last time, we had a good war was, when Hitler was on the rise. After that, I'm not sure there's been a single time when I can feel wholeheartedly that we were doing the right thing with our military. So,
right. For me, the historical lesson, well, I guess this isn't a historical lesson, but I had a moment of deep shame when, kind of early on in the story, and she just does like a really quick overview, like what is Iran, Iraq, Persia, how does it all fit together?
Right.
She mentioned Xerxes, and my first thought was Rodrigo Santoro from 300.
He's 8 feet tall and he's got piercing.
Yeah, like didn't he have some like monstrously deep voice? No.
Yeah. No. That 300 is. I mean, number one, we're in Frank Miller territory, so we're already in a weird place. But yeah, he told that story completely from the Greek Spartan point of view. No
shame that I'm like, this is so interesting. I'm like, why is that the name that jumps out at me?
Yeah, there is a. It would be interesting to see the story of Xerxes from his point of view rather than from Frank Miller's, because it was a pretty one-sided ideal. And to be honest, at that point in time, the Persians were a very advanced civilization, a lot of free thinking and stuff. And the world might be a better place if if the Persians had taken over. I don't know. There's no way to know for sure, but it wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world, because they were a pluralistic society. Lots of different peoples, lots of different ideas, lots of different religions. They didn't really make anybody adopt anything they didn't want to. Yeah. And I'm like, who knows? There might be greater love and understanding in the world if, the Persians had taken over a chunk of it rather than the Romans. I don't know, but
I did have one question for you. I know that I see that we're over time. My question was, did any part of this make you cry?
Oh, I'm going to tell you something about me. Here's what you're going to. I have ADHD, and one of the things about that is that I react to things instinctively without having like the filter in your head to like slow you down about it. I'll cry at like a Charmin commercial that's particularly touching. So yes, there were moments in this book that definitely, plucked at the heartstrings. I mean, and sometimes it was even the more abstract things. It was the thing about thinking about the war and about how many, the Charmin bears. I have a whole rant about them, and I don't want to see bears wiping their butt. But the going back to Persepolis, the idea of war and in the abstract, when they're mentioning how many people have died and thinking about these young kids that have gone off and died in war and stuff like that, that was heartbreaking to me. And then when Marjane's all alone by herself in Europe and she's living homeless and she almost dies, there were different moments like that. And I'm trying to think, because I didn't take notes. I know there were other places in the book that grabbed me like that. I was not jotting down where I was in the story every time I grabbed a Kleenex, so I don't know. This is definitely a story that had those moments for me, though. But what are you thinking of? Because I'm sure you have something in mind that I'm forgetting and not thinking of right now.
I was thinking specifically of the end of book 1, and when her mother collapses.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, dagger in the heart. Yeah, when she's getting on the plane to go to Europe, and she looks back and at her parents one last time, and she sees that her father is carrying, and they're getting a silhouette for the most part. The father's carrying the mom back to the car because her mom is completely collapsed, and she has, "I wish I hadn't looked back." And it was just like, oh God, like she's 14 years old, she's going to Europe, it's all by herself.
She's all by herself, and like everything, like just like the sacrifice. I was like, oh my God.
And that's what they had to do, to keep her safe, because she was too independent a thinker to live under the regime that was coming to power in Iran at the moment. And, there was real physical danger to her if she had lived there. I did not foresee a good end for her if she stayed in Iran. She was going to say something to the wrong person. She was going to stand up to the wrong authority figure. And then, oh God, there it is. It's there's that hard silhouette I remember. And, depressing scene. So, it's, yeah, that was a heartbreaker. But she had a lot of heartbreak in her life, and most of it, she learned the lessons that were inherent in there. It never was. I don't think she ever had anything that broke her completely. She would learn the lesson in that moment and apply it to her, things later in life. And I think that's that. All right, producer Patty is telling us that we have spent a full hour on that. I appreciate everyone come by. Is there any last thoughts? Is there anything we didn't get to? I think I've checked off most of the stuff on my list. You got anything else that we needed to talk about, Vivian? Hey, it's Dana.
No.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everyone coming back. I wanted to say I picked out a book for next month. I wanted to see what it is. It's Goldie Vance, which is by Eisner winner Hope Lawrence, and Brittany Williams is the illustrator who did the Hellcat book from a little bit ago. That's where I first knew her, and then I love her even more in this. Fantastic book. This is an all ages event, so anybody can read Goldie Vance, and I think everybody should. You don't have to be a kid to read this book. I bought it, and I told the guy at the comic shop, Ben, my local comic shop owner, who's a fantastic guy, I said, yeah, I'm getting this for my kids, because I'm in Heroic Girls and stuff, and I need to get. And I don't think my kids even took a second glance at this thing. I read this book for 2 years. Goldie Vance is a great book. And so if you do have kids and you're interested in this kind of thing, they're welcome to join us. We're going to talk about Goldie Vance next time. Completely different direction, and no depressing war or death or drug overdoses. It's a much lighter fare.
Homelessness.
Bronchitis, none of that.
Austrian winter.
None of that stuff. So come join us next month for Goldie Vance. I appreciate everyone stopping by this time, and we will see you in a month. Bye.
Bye.